Welcome back. So in this lesson, we're going to talk about really quickly the pros and cons of the owning approach to your Airbnb or short-term rental business versus arbitrage. Owning, of course, means that you are actually acquiring the property, whether you're financing it, whether you're paying all cash, whatever your approach is to real estate investing, you're actually acquiring the asset first and then converting it into an Airbnb or short-term rental space. The pros, of course, is debt pay down, appreciation capture, tax benefits, and you control the asset. Minus, of course, the homeowners associations and all the rules and stipulations that they put in place to, that sometimes can be a headache. But overall, your debt pay down, you're paying down the debt on an asset that you will eventually own. And so you can leverage that in so many different ways if you actually now own the asset as opposed to just renting it out to then rent. Appreciation capture, especially if you are in the right area. If you position yourself correctly, do your due diligence, and you get a property that you acquire, that you actually own, and it's in a great area, that property is going to appreciate. That simply means that the property may be acquired for $200,000, and in 4 years, the property is now worth $450,000. So almost all real estate, if it's in the right area, will continue to appreciate in value. And as that appreciation happens, you actually are increasing your wealth because you turn $200,000 into $450,000. That means you have a $250,000 cash value added to that property if you decide to sell it on the back end. And then, of course, the tax benefits are just ridiculous. There are so many tax benefits that we can't even get into naming a bunch of them. But just know that this is probably why the most self-made millionaires in the world chose real estate as their investment vehicle, because there are so many ways you can monetize this asset. And of course, the cons, much more capital is needed, and it takes a longer time to scale. What do I mean by that? Well, it's obvious. If I'm arbitraging, I'm just putting down what's necessary to get it up and running and furnished. If I'm buying it, I now have to come up with the capital to first purchase the property, possibly even rehab it somewhat, then furnish it, and then be able to rent it out and turn it to an Airbnb. So we know that much more capital is needed to do this, and it takes a longer time to scale because I'm now in a situation where if I'm doing this method exclusively, I have to go through that whole process over and over again. Finding the right property, closing on the property, possibly rehabbing it, furnishing it, and then getting it listed and getting it to market. So you can see how it takes a long time. If you're smart, you actually would do a combination of both of these things. You will own and you will arbitrage. No different than how you host. You can use all of those methods for hosting. Why do either or when it could be and? However, there are also some pros and cons to the arbitrage approach. Of course, the pros are less capital needed to entry. It's a mobile business, easier to scale. So obviously the same things that are pros on the ownership one will probably be cons on this one, and vice versa. So it takes me little capital to entry, maybe $5,000, as I showed you in the earlier example, maybe $5,000, $6,000, maybe less than that. All you're doing is, paying the first month's rent, putting down your security deposit, getting the utilities turned on, and furnishing the place. And as long as you have that lease in place, you have a business. And how quickly can you do that over and over again and duplicate that process? So again, easy scalability, way less capital for entry. Cons are, however, owner calls the shots and can choose not to renew lease or substantially raise rents. All the pros of owning are cons with arbitrage. That means no tax write-offs, well, not as great a tax write-offs, no equity build-up, no debt pay down. So all the things that, again, there were pros on one side or cons over here. Now, the one thing that you do want to consider is the owner calls the shots. You don't control the property. And so you do a 2-year lease with them, end of the 2 years, you have a great business going, making $10,000, $20,000 a month, and they decide they don't want to renew the lease, or they raise the rents up so ridiculously high that you say, oh, I'm going to opt out. But again, You made your money from it. Now you can take that money and just invest in the next Airbnb and keep it moving. So there are many benefits, but you do need to know the pros and cons. I say use your discretion, and as you build your capital, maybe start out with arbitraging because it's quicker to get in and start making money. But you then use that capital to actually now purchase property. So now you do a combination of the owner approach and the arbitrage approach. So those are just my suggestions. But I did want you to know the pros and cons of each so that you know how to approach this in a very informed way and decide for yourself which one or both will work for you. I'll see you on the next lesson.